Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Elitist Geek. VR news for Sunday, September 3rd, 2016. And holy crap, my phone was literally abuzz with texts, messages, having to do with the venturebeat.com article from yesterday, whose headline reads exactly as follows. VR adoption among Steam users has crashed to a halt. So at first glance, you know, it's obviously a bit of a sensationalist headline, slightly alarmist, and I get all of that. I get that news companies want to separate themselves from other news companies because there's a lot of people that are going to be clicking on these. There's a lot of competition. So whether it's making your same exact news story a little more appealing to click on, well, a lot of people just click the first thing that comes up in Google. Other people are swayed by alarmist or sensationalist headlines, right? That's just human nature. That's marketing. That's psychology. It's a study in and unto itself. We don't have the time or the desire to do that right now, but we are going to talk about it in just quick summary terms, right? So to understand, so in July, 0.3% for the HTC Vive, and it kind of flatlined in terms of new users, new Steam users. But let's put that into some context. Let's look at the Sony PlayStation, widely regarded as one of the most awe-inspiring, conquering consoles in terms of sales figures in its lifetime. 100 million, it crossed that threshold about 10 years after it launched. But what a lot of people forget is that it took 9 months for the Sony PlayStation to hit the 1 million mark, right? In terms of console units sold. 18 months to hit 5 million. But you can see that within about roughly the same period of time, so from launch to the 9-month mark, Sony PlayStation sells 1 million units. The next 9 months, it sells 4 million units. So you can see how that curve just ramped up after the first 9 months. A lot of that, again, it's psychology, it's human nature, it's a study of marketing, it's a lot of those things. But the bottom line is, don't be too alarmed by that headline if you're an early VR adopter like me, because therein lies some of the reason for that. The majority of the early adopters, me, you guys, we're out of the way. We've purchased this already. There are tons of people that are taking a wait-and-see approach. They want to wait and see their buddy with the Vive. How do they feel about these units, right? How do they feel about the Rift or the Vive this many months in? Now, I'm going to do a video after this talking about 4 months in, exactly that. But let's stay on topic. So 18 months to hit 5 million, 9 months to hit 1 million, 10 years to cross 100 million. So you can just see the amazing ramp. And you can find surveys and statistics to back up almost any argument. You could have one argument, the counter argument to that, the same set of numbers, and argue it both ways. Again, that's reality, that's interpretation. But again, let's dig a little deeper. The other thing to consider is it is summertime. Summer's traditionally slower for sales. If you look at console sales over time, doesn't matter which console you pick, overwhelmingly, you're going to find out that summer was the slowest. Again, even for the Sony PlayStation, those were the slowest months for sales, July and August. So I believe I said it was 0.3% in July for the Vive in terms of new users and flatlined for August. The other thing to consider, though, is not just the summer factor, but it's how most of these console companies do their financial statements, right? And what I mean by that is most Japanese companies tend to kind of do at least that's my understanding, they tend to have a fiscal year that's different from the calendar year. And what I mean by that is a lot of North American companies will have a fiscal year. Fiscal years, for those who don't know, it's simply when you do your taxes, right? Or when you report to shareholders, you give them a quarterly update, say. Well, when you follow a calendar year, the first quarter is January, February, March. If, like a lot of Japanese companies, you have a fiscal year that ends in, at the end of March, then first quarter for those companies isn't January, February, March, it's April, May, June, right? So everything is kind of pushed up 3 months and will encompass 2 calendar years or a portion of 2 calendar years. So there's lots of factors when you look into this. So if I'm asked by my buddies, does this worry you? Are you alarmed? No, because you're also getting the people who are sitting back and waiting. And what are they waiting for? They're waiting for price drops. They're waiting for games, experiences that for them are compelling. And if there isn't a lot of compelling reasons to get a VR unit, they're not going to part with their hard-earned cash. And I don't frickin' blame them. My story's different. I've got the channel where I want to talk about as many different mainstream VR things as I can, but also, and I've mentioned this a ton, I've waited literally my whole life. So I'm the unusual guy, right? The sales are going to come. I have no doubt about that. Could they still go horribly wrong? Of course. A lot of it's going to ride on what games we see from now to the end of the holiday season. That's going to be huge in determining ultimately the success of virtual reality. But at this point in time, at the 4-month mark, I am still not worried. Because again, when you look at it compared to other units, we're sitting just fine. Even at that high price point, we're still doing okay. Let's talk about something a little less statistically, no more comparative analysis. Well, okay, we're comparing here again, right? As I say that, the next news article is a comparison, but let's not talk about the money. Let's just talk about the units. And we're talking about the Gear VR. Oculus designed and built, basically, Samsung driven in terms of the screen technology. But what are the biggest differences now that we actually see it in stores, the new Gear VR? And hopefully my order, which was supposed to be in this week, I ended up picking the wrong mailbox in the States. I picked it in a border town that is open literally 2 hours in a day. So I picked the wrong one. It is 24/7 access, but yeah, it's not going to be there either way until early next week. But the differences primarily are color. The old one was white, exterior and interior, which a lot of people ultimately complained about. Well, we know that's definitely been remedied because it's black, or at least a very dark gray on the inside. It's more comfortable. And yes, in fact, 101-degree field of view as opposed to the original 96 degrees. So I did talk about this. If you guys are thinking, well, there's deja vu, Epix has talked about this already. You're absolutely right. I did. But some of it was still speculative, right? It was basically best guess. Now we know for sure. Those are the specs. So yeah, still looking forward to getting mine. And as soon as it arrives, I'm going to throw the Note 7 into it. And for anybody who's been asking me, and there's been a few of you, about more Gear VR orientated stuff, which I try to work in if there's relevant things. But because I'm in between units right now, I haven't had a chance to look at the games for you guys. But that'll come. You guys know the games come a lot slower, like the part 2s. But they're coming. I assure you, I've got that staycation time. They're going to come fast and furious. Next news piece has to do with another HMD, the STARBREEZE STARVR that I talked about. Man, I think it was back in early July was the last time we looked at it. At that time, I reported it as a commercial-only unit. Fast forward to now, September, and that's still the case. However, we're actually seeing it now ship. So off the production lines into Imax hands. So Imax is kind of officially the first big company that we know there's a order for, right? So again, just to remind you of some of the specs of these things, 210-degree field of view. Now, the statistics for that, and we just talked about statistics, how you can argue that, right? A lot of people were concerned that, okay, look, well, human field of view is this, and you can't really make that comparison. You can to a certain degree, but there's a lot of factors that go into human field of vision. There's not just horizontal, there's also vertical, and then there's all of that, the peripheral, that makes up human field of view. And from one human to the next, you're going to have slight variation, right? But overall, it's not an apples to apples. When you say, wow, this has 210 degree, you can't really apples to apples compare that to human field of view. What we can say is that this StarVR is roughly at about 75% of what your human eyes do for you. So think about it that way. Just think that roughly 3/4 of what you see when you look around is going to be available for you on the StarVR compared to the Rift, the Vive that, have a lower horizontal field of view, but make up for it in other ways, right? Lens design, there's all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, with the Rift and the Vive, you're still getting black on the periphery, right? Horizontal, vertical, it's noticeable. As we move forward, just like with every other frickin' spec, field of view is going to improve. And I think this 210 being offered is an improvement. So it's 2 screens, and they're 5.5-inch HD panels. Overall, it provides 5120 by 1440 pixel resolution. Per eye, 2160 by 1200. And you can see that it's not exactly half, and there's some reasons for that, but they don't explain that in the article. They just kind of talk about it roughly, in rough terms, by giving the specs. And we know the refresh rate is 90 hertz, so that matches the Rift and the Vive. Not the Sony, but really we know the Sony does 120 because of reprojection. It couldn't actually hit a true 120 with the current hardware in all but the most simple polygon textured games, which probably wouldn't be a lot of fun. Well, correction, they could be fun, they wouldn't look that good. But I guess, you know what, even there, pixel-wise. But whatever, you get the point. So, seeing these, as soon as I see these at the Imax near my place, and I have a theater that actually looks pretty cool. It literally looks like a UFO, is this Cineplex Odeon. It's huge. And it's called Colossus. And it is a Colossus. It's massive. Anyways, they have an IMAX, so I haven't reached out to them yet, but I will. I'm curious if they're one of the locations, because I know they're probably the most profitable, or one of the most profitable around, to see if and when they're going to get their units, because I will go in and I will see if I can get permission from them to kind of go in between when there's actually people in there and be able to report a story. That's my hope. I'm going to approach the manager next week, and hopefully I can work something out, because that would be awesome. But look for that at IMAXs near you. In fact, do me a favor, if you have the time and you're going to a movie, if you could ask if they know about the StarVR units at their theater, when they're coming, if they're coming, and let me know. That would be awesome. That would be super appreciated. And of course, tell me where you are in North America when you do that. Now, next news piece has to do with Jon Favreau. He's the director for the original Iron Man, which was a movie that I personally really, really liked. I thought it was awesome in terms of the characters. We don't need to get into the whys with Tony Stark, but suffice it to say, he's probably one of my favorite character actors for the superhero genre. He's done a fantastic job on that. Downey Jr. has. Now, Jon Favreau is working on a project called Gnomes and Goblins. And he's a guy that was just absolutely floored. He considers it one of the most overwhelming experiences of his life. And I'm talking about his viewing of something called The Blue. Haven't even done any real research on that. I'm going to look into it. It blew his mind. It's got to be pretty good. Well, we'll find out, and I'll let you know. But it was called The Blue, and it literally blew his mind. So he's partnered with a VR company, and they are going to release in or about September 8th, on or about September 8th, a free download for what he's billing as an interactive fictional setting. And John considers it kind of like a blend. Like his ultimate vision is going to be the traditional narrative with an absolutely immersive simulated environment, and considers, Gnomes and Goblins a step in that direction. So there is so much out there. I mean, we complain about the games thing, you and I, as early adopters. Thankfully, with 2 units, I'm able to kind of find enough to keep me stimulated and interested. But I'm going to talk more about that in the other video. Suffice it to say, for this, yeah, it's something I'm going to try. And I know I had the joke about free stuff yesterday, but I am curious, is this going to be a 3 to 8 minute one? I imagine it would be, right? It sounds pretty cool, though. You're able to go into this environment, this little village. There's foliage, trees, and there's no real set storyline. It's about interacting with the environment. So to what degree they do that, I gotta admit, I'm curious, and I will check it out. Now, here's a company that we haven't heard a lot from in a while, and that's HARMONIX in terms of the Rock Band stuff, right? So it was 2005, Guitar Hero launched. Rock Band a couple of years later. 2005 for Guitar Hero, 2007 for Rock Band. And it started just a massive craze at the time. Like, if anybody remembers, it was huge, right? The fake musical instrument side of things was huge. What made it so successful was, and really it was VR in a different way, right? Was the fact that here you, a crappy musician, and I'm talking in the general sense, could pick up a fake guitar or drum and feel for seconds, minutes, hell, hours, because people junkied on this, what it would be like, sort of, to be a rock star. Well, now with virtual reality, HARMONIX hopes to take that into a whole different level, just completely different stratosphere. And they're approaching their rebooted Rock Band from that original kind of design spec, right, of putting you in the musician's shoes, literally now. So hopefully, this doesn't become another really kind of weird thing. For me personally, as kind of a late guitar guy, I've picked it up really late in life, it's been awesome. I don't think I could personally go back to a pretend instrument, but I understand why that exists, because not everybody wants to. It's like locomotion, right? We talk about that all the time, the running around versus the sitting. Honestly, most of the time I want to sit. I don't want to run around like a person possessed. There are times and places for that. And if it's going to immerse me more in a game world, by all means. If I'm purposely going out of my way for a cardio style workout game, by all means. I got no problem with that, with any of that. But just to do it as a gimmick, when you could offer the same experience seated, then offer both. That's kind of my thought on that. But I am curious what they're going to come up with, because the one thing you can say for sure about both Rock Band and Guitar Hero is that there are a hell of a lot. I'd actually be curious as to what the actual number is of very dusty fake plastic musical instruments out there. I know we had the drum set. We had the whole kit and caboodle because it was a fun activity for me to do with my daughter. But the reality is, like a lot of cardio equipment, the stuff is either gathering dust or holding laundry. That's basically the gist of it. So still interested in this. Not sure if I'm going to jump at it, but you know, for the channel, it may be something to kind of look at and pursue. All right, guys, that's it. I've got a 4-month video coming up, and the gaming videos will continue. Ended up getting really sidetracked with my buddy last night, but the ones, and you know which ones I'm talking about, will be forthcoming. As always, guys, cheers, and definitely catch you on the flip side.